minutes, or will you split between yourself and Councillor Jeremy?
It will be split between myself and Councillor Jeremy.
Okay, then please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. There isn't any doubt that COVID has had a massive impact on all councils across the country, and no less so in Norfolk. Neither is there any doubt at the failure of government to live up to repeated promises to sort out local government funding, or at the very least give us a long-term settlement. The leader has had to repeatedly beg his own government to keep their promise of sorting council finances and social care. But Norfolk, along with councils of all political colours across the country, have been ignored and let down by the Prime Minister's repeated false, empty promises. And the latest promise is a hollow devolution deal that doesn't even offer us an empty suitcase to fill with cheap booze for a hastily abandoned work quiz. However, we can't keep on using those excuses for the failures that we witnessed throughout this budget today. Adult social care provided to Norfolk residents is measured by the CQC as worst in the country. Day after day, we see the care sector teetering on a cliff edge. We've seen what used to be called unmet care needs rebranded to interim care. The number of people who are not getting the care they need and have a right to has rocketed to over 800. Whichever word you use to describe people getting either no care at all or insufficient care, it is an outrage that tramples over people's dignity and rights. People are left stranded in their own beds or homes, in hospital, and with more and more being asked of family members and unpaid carers. The crisis isn't just in services for adults, but children's too. The investment in school places for children with special educational needs and disabilities, SEND, which gets a mention at just about every opportunity, is great for the young people and their families who stand to benefit. But children waiting for places at the new schools are already being turned down and told they're full. It doesn't tell the story of those children or of the 3,500 children waiting for an EHCP or with an out-of-date EHCP, overdue annual review, or of children with an agreed plan but no support in place. It doesn't tell the story of the children who can't face going to school because the school doesn't have the right funding, resources or training to meet their needs. The ever-increasing demand for education, health and care plans shows the seriousness of the situation, that the system designed to support children with SEND in mainstream schools is just not working. Think about the reality for all of those young children, people and families who are entitled to support but have to battle each step of the way to get it. Shockingly, but if all else fails, we can rely on this administration's commitment to roads, can't we? Well, no, actually, we can't. Because as we discovered last week, the mitigation of the very real risk of failing to secure funding for the Western Link Road that should be in place isn't. This risk is recorded in the Corporate Risk Register. It has been approved by the Audit Committee. It has been repeatedly approved by Cabinet. Yet mitigation still has not been implemented. This is a recognised risk which has the potential to wipe out the Council's reserves. It means that at best other schemes would have to be reprioritised. The administration claims they learn lessons from the massive overspend on the Northern Distributor Road. We are yet to see any evidence for that in how this financially and environmentally reckless project is being managed. We hear from the administration in this budget that everything will be fine because of the changes that will become about as a result of introducing new technology or new systems. But to steal from Greta Thunberg for a minute, blah, blah, blah. I think we've been living with technology long enough to know the benefits. Far from being transformational or radical, early intervention in the adoption and implementation of new computer or digital-based systems should be considered business as usual. What we should be urgently implementing as business as usual is a sharp, penetrating and unrelenting focus on our commitment to meet net zero for the county by 2030. Everything that we do as a council should be for the benefit of all residents so that they can afford to switch to low carbon options in all areas of their lives. The laser-like vision and careful, measurable action that will require is absolutely lacking in these budget papers. Your trumpeted actions that the council has taken, like belatedly switching to LED lights after refusing to back Labour's earlier amendment to do just that, or offshoots from other projects like the recycling of laptops during the pandemic, are meagre. This administration is grasping at straws trying to claim recycling of laptops as a success. Cabinet members repeatedly refused to accept responsibility for making sure there were laptops for learners and refused to back our campaign to ensure that all children and young people could access a suitable device and connectivity. Our young people continue to bear the impact of that avoidable, prolonged digital exclusion. It has further widened inequality. Digital exclusion remains an enormous barrier, not just to learning, but to other social and cultural opportunities. So what exactly does the administration propose to do about it? We are failing a generation who have borne the brunt of disadvantage during the pandemic and 11 years of austerity. And now on Together for Norfolk. Well, it's a long shopping list of high-level aspirations with no detail. We were promised the detail later on, yet there's nothing in this budget. There was nothing of any substance in the last Cabinet papers. We are promised a delivery plan in March. So actually what the Cabinet is asking for approval for is a budget without telling us exactly what it's going to be spent on. But there are two things we do know. One is that there is a proposal to reorganise the council, and the second that there is a huge contract with Newton Europe Consultancy worth 6.3 million to tell us what we already know is wrong with social care. It's also been quite clearly implied that any further reorganisations would make use of expensive consultants. So let's have a look at that 6.3 million fee that currently sits in the Adult Social Care Business Reserve. Yes, it's real money available to spend on people's care now. It doesn't have to be generated by cuts. It's right there, right now. 1% on council tax raises something over 4 million. So 6.3 million is around 1.5% council tax increase. The proposals today are to approve 3% rather than the 4% because of the pressure on Norfolk's residents from food and fuel costs rising at an alarming rate. Add to that flatlining pensions, the threat to free prescriptions and the national insurance increases, those national insurance increases that we won't get the promised benefits from. This simply exacerbates our budget problems while still loading onto household bills for the citizens of Norfolk. This Tory administration is seeking credit for not putting council tax up by that extra 1%. We would have preferred to see government properly fund councils so that any rise could be avoided. People are already really struggling after having 11 years of austerity imposed on them, plus the huge impact of COVID. The financial aftershocks are enormous. That nearly 3% increase in council tax will take around 13 million a year out of the pockets of Norfolk residents. It might alleviate some of our council budget hole, but the knock-on effect is that communities will just increase demand on our services. Council tax is a regressive tax that hits the poorest hardest. With only Labour-run Norwich City Council protecting council tax relief for the poorest at 100%, those residents already living in poverty beyond Norwich will be the hardest hit. The equivalent of half of that council tax rise will be the fees that go to Newton Europe. In the consultation, we don't recall the public being asked to express an opinion on whether half of their council tax increase should be spent on private consultants. I'm pretty sure that given a choice, they would much rather see that money spent in other ways. That's why we're suggesting other ways it should be spent. We reject the use of language to cover up cuts, but of course there's always room for change, improvement, efficiency, and less, if you like, transformation. Nobody has any objection to getting better value for money or finding new and innovative ways of delivering service. But local government is excellent at that. And the pandemic showed brilliantly what local government and other local public and community services can do when given the freedom to act quickly and decisively for the benefit of their communities. If we ever needed any more evidence, the last couple of years have shown just how committed, creative and innovative our staff are. We have a team of senior managers. We have a whole transformation directorate. We have staff doing the work on the ground that know their communities and have great ideas about what would help and improve services. Newton Europe is supposed to be a short-term engagement, despite the huge cost. Is anybody really going to try and tell us that once the money is spent and Newton Europe are out of the door with their pockets bulging, that everything in the garden will be rosy and we'll never have to change anything again? Of course not. So rather than spend money on external short-term resources with no accountability, let's spend £1 million a year for 3 years out of that 6.3 million on boosting our own internal resources to do that job. Our staff don't need payment by results. They've shown that they take pride in their work, the service they provide, and their commitment and loyalty to Norfolk and the County Council. £1 million a year invested in them will show our trust, our faith and our commitment to the staff of the County Council who have served us so well. With the remaining money that we don't have to spend on consultants, we've made proposals that are actually aligned with some of the policy initiatives emanating from government. We're looking for common ground, not conflict, and we're demanding compassion, not consultants. Government initiatives such as family hubs, levelling up for young people and preparing young learners to get the best from the education investment areas are not so far away from the things that we would like to see happen, not least because they are thinly disguised U-turns by a short-sighted government have to acknowledge that scrapping flagship Labour policies like Sure Start centres, the youth service and connections has been catastrophic for our communities as well as a false economy. They still don't go far enough, though, and focus on social mobility rather than genuine social inclusion. A study into the cost, quality and operational standards of social care in Norfolk will help us go beyond the stale ideological arguments that sometimes get in the way of delivering the kind of care people in Norfolk need. Realistically, there will probably be a balance between directly provided by arm's length companies and commission services. We would aim to go much further with a widespread programme of insourcing, but more important for now is that there should be an informed debate based on actual evidence. Each minute that you let the broken care market continue in its present form, all you are doing is pouring in money into a system that is fundamentally broken and failing those who have a right to care. We desperately need to do more to support unpaid carers. Our proposal builds on the disability-related expenditure, DRE work, which is currently being done to ensure that anyone can be fully and genuinely compensated for the irrefutable additional cost of living with a disability. DRE must be urgently reviewed to take into account the rising cost of heating and energy. The return of the warden support would be both extremely popular and entirely consistent with the agreed policy of this council to keep people as independent as possible for as long as possible. Our final revenue proposal is the scoping of a Plan B for the Norwich Western Link. The absence of a Plan B means that should the Western Link scheme fail for whatever reason, there is no capital asset to set against the approaching 20 million capital which will revert to revenue. That leaves a sword of Damocles over virtually all of our reserves. It absolutely guarantees that there will be no money left for an alternative scheme to deal with rat running and congestion in the Western Longville, Ringland and Cossey areas. Plan B would create an alternative scheme that could absorb transferable capital costs and reduce the impact, whilst at the same time making sure that the legitimate concerns of communities affected by rat running are not just swept aside. There are two capital schemes included in our budget amendment. The Labour group has been trying to bring the Norwich International Skate Park to Council for some time, but unfortunately we have been prevented from debating that due to the curtailing of meetings. Today we do, and it's a chance to agree to invest a relatively small amount from a capital receipt and use part of the land at the Norwich Airport Industrial Estate to create an international standard skate park. The excitement that we all enjoyed in the Olympics of the extraordinary feats performed on skateboards, BMX and scooters could come to Norfolk. It's a great opportunity, and it's a one-off opportunity. And it might well be that we don't have to spend that much because once we've made that financial commitment, match funding could be levered from elsewhere. Finally, to the COVID Commemorative Fund. Nowhere in our county and no person in our county has been untouched by the pandemic. Our communities have lived through traumatic bereavements where the usual celebrations of life and death rituals have been disrupted. Our communities have suffered together and many have suffered alone. In the midst of the sadness and fear has been extraordinary experiences and stories of hope, individual sacrifice and communities coming together that have been nothing short of inspiring. Now is the time to help communities provide for themselves suitable memorials. The County Council has been an important part and partner. Whether members, officers or partners, we will all welcome the opportunity that such a fund would give, extending that spirit. Our County Council showing the lead by helping people to come to terms with and properly mark the past 2 years. Yes, our group is highly critical of this administration in many ways.
You just have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, our group is highly critical of this administration in so many ways, but this is an opportunity to show us where your values